Noah told me he brought a rock in the house today because he was like, Mommy, I brought this rock just in case we came inside and there was a lion or a bear. I throw it at him. And I was like, first of all, why is there a lion in the resort? Problems, okay? Secondly, if there's you ain't gonna do nothing with this rock. Like the empty threats here, but in his mind, he's David. But anyways,
he comes in behalf of the name of the Lord. Okay, Noah is ready.
He be ready.
He's ready. Yo, welcome back to the Vibes Daily Podcast. It is day 257 of our year-long series we have titled Devoted, as we are journeying through the entire Bible from cover to cover, from Genesis to Revelation. You have joined us here in the book of Ezekiel, and I am back again, joined by my wife, Victoria, as we are in our last day of reading for this week, and we'll pick up here on chapter 37. We last left off on 36, which was a reminder of God to the people of Israel, that he would restore them to the land and also to just himself, essentially, kind of is what we left off last. And man, we get probably maybe the most well-known passage in Ezekiel, I would say.
I would agree.
That like people may not even know it's in Ezekiel specifically, but they have probably heard this reference to the Valley of the Dry Bones, essentially, which is what we pick up here in chapter 37 to do our reading today. But just before we get into this discussion, we'll only cover 3 out of our 4 chapters on this podcast. I'll talk a little bit about why that is at the end, but did want to at least preview to say we'll go through 37, 38, and 39 today. But chapter 37, Valley of the Dry Bones, is another image, another illustration. I told our church on Sunday that Ezekiel, like if Jeremiah is the weeping prophet, Ezekiel is the visual prophet, because he has nothing but visions and parables and illustrations and demonstrations, all these ways to kind of show that. And so we see one here in 37, this Valley of the Dry Bones. What stuck out to you here in this vision that he gets?
Yeah, of course, verse 3.
Okay.
And I just love Ezekiel's response to God. When God asks him, Son of man, can these bones live? I love his response. I don't even know how to like really put it into words, but he replies, Lord God, only you know. And just that response just has so much humility. And it wasn't even like, because it wasn't even like he could have said like, well, I don't know. That's still like a self-reflective thing, right? And he was just like, no, only, why are you asking me? Like, only you know all things that are possible. So can you, Lord? That was, I don't even know where to like go from there, because I'm just kind of like stuck right there. Like, I love his response.
Yeah, no, that is good. Definitely just that, like you said, that humility, but also that acknowledgement that God has all knowledge and power himself. I think for me, the piece that just reflects, or that I reflected on, is just, we've seen to this point, we've already seen the resurrection of the dead, that I believe Elijah is the one that does that. Is Elijah or Elisha? You can always tell me.
It's Elijah.
It's Elijah. That's what I thought. We also see Elisha when he throws his cloak. Also.
No, wait. It's Elisha. With the Shunammite woman?
Or her son?
And her son? That's Elisha.
Okay. Then I thought, but doesn't Elisha also throw his cloak? Or his cloak is thrown because of the double portion piece. Like his last miracle is when his cloak is like thrown, or his bones are thrown somewhere, and like somebody raises.
Yes.
At the end. Okay.
Yeah, his bones are thrown inside somebody's grave, and those grave like that person comes to life.
Yeah. So, long story short, there's a couple signs we already know of resurrection that have happened so far. Of course, we'll get, the big one, the grand finale, in the Gospels. But I think what stands out to me is this intentional, like, pointing out that they're dry bones, right?
Dry.
Because, like, it does go to show how long they've been dead. And I think, like, that it's twofold. Number one, just like, again, the power and the ability to raise even what has been dead for a long time.
Yeah.
Like a long time. Like to be dried. Like that is a long time. Like there's no marrow left, right? There's no, like, just thinking about, you're the anatomy person, but just to think about like how long these bones or these people had to be of dead. But also specifically the fact that that's a reference to Israel. Right? And like,
how long it must have been.
How long they've been dead to him. You know what I'm saying? Like, just think about that. Like these bones are dry. Like y'all have been dead to me for a while. Like, you know what I'm saying? And I just think that specifically kind of just jumped out to me because, of course, again, it's all an illustration about how he's going to restore them and bring them back to life. But I don't know, just that emphasis on the length of how long they've been dead, as well as also just the power and ability to still be able to resurrect something like that.
And I love that you mentioned this because it'd be one thing if he was like a sea full of dead people, right? And like you said, they still had their clothes or they were just somewhat decaying, right? And he just restored them. But the fact that like in his restoration, he had to put on tendons and flesh, right? And muscle and veins and all that, that comes with it. He had to put all these things to restore them and breathe life into them. He could have just been like, Lord, like he didn't have to start with bones, right? Like he didn't have to be that drastic. But like you said, he does. And then after the Lord restores them and builds them up and does all these things for them, they could have just been a city of people. They could have just been some common townsmen, but yet they're an army.
Yeah.
Right? Like a force to be reckoned with.
Yeah.
And so I think that was also really interesting to me that like, they probably, like you said, a sea of people that have died because they were an army, then they was probably killing each other. But like the fact that like he has taken them to these bones that have been dead for this long, and has resurrected an army out of them, it's like the God he can do anything. And so even when I'm like thinking about people in my life that just seem so far from the Lord, that like, God, there is no way that they're ever going to listen to you. Like he can do it. If he can raise up some dry bones and bring them to life, right? And use them for his glory, like surely he could use somebody who I think is lost, right? Or surely he could use a situation. Right? I just think about the things that I make in my life to be so big. But yeah, anyways, I want to go on a tangent, but
no, that's good. I mean, or even just things that you feel like are dead, right?
Yeah,
like
things are
dreams, visions, like ideas that you feel like, right? Like, man, he can resurrect any of that. As you said, it doesn't matter how long it's been, and that's good. Like it's definitely intentional, like you said, that he is doing that, and it also just kind of, to me, reminds me a little bit of like the creation story, or how I would view the creation story have happened, right? Because obviously there weren't bones involved when Adam was created, but he does start from dust, right?
Yeah.
So God has to create all of those things, from bone to tendons to, the flesh and all of that, to organs, as he creates this this being. And so, seeing as we've already read the fact that like he's taking our hearts of stones and turning them to flesh, he's kind of giving us these new heart, like it almost is like even just a reference to the fact that I have literally like waited until you were nothing but bone to completely rebuild you, into this person that I need you to be. So that was interesting too.
Definitely.
But it kind of continues in verse 15, and this was a little bit of something that I thought we were going to get to yesterday, but very interesting intentional or illustration of reunifying Israel, because as we have said time and time again, at this point Israel is two different kingdoms, essentially, the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom. But he gives Ezekiel a vision that Israel will be unified, and Ephraim, who represents Israel, and Judah, will essentially come back together in this image of this stick or staff that'll come together. What jumps out to you in the rest of 37?
Yeah, I think that just that 32 and 32 specifically talks about, like you said, how there will no longer be two nations, no longer a divided kingdom. But in 23, I also love that, like, together, like, they will not defile themselves anymore with their idols, their abhorrent things, and their transgressions. That He will save them. And so, that was interesting to me. But then transitioning into 24, my servant David, which I'm believing is Jesus, right, will be king over them, and there will be one shepherd for all of them. They will follow my ordinances and keep my statutes and obey them. I think it's really interesting because he keeps talking about how this servant David will be their prince forever. And then he gonna make another covenant with these people. If you don't listen, I'd be about over covenants. I'd be like, I am not binding myself to you guys in any other way, shape, or form ever again.
Yeah.
But here he makes another covenant, a covenant of peace, which we know Jesus says that He brings them peace, right?
Yeah. Well, that's a good call out, because really chapter 37 through the end of Ezekiel is much more about like the end times and like the second coming of Jesus or the millennium, like just what the end time will look like, much more than even like a in this life prediction, right? So even the dry bones reference, but also just this unification, as you mentioned, Jesus being that prince, like it's much more about a prediction of the future, because as we'll get to with we'll talk about this Gog and Magog here in a sec, in the next chapter or two, but even once reading from 40 through 48, you deal with the new temple and this new city and all sorts of stuff. So like we have transitioned a little bit like Isaiah does, right, where we transition to part of prophecy that wasn't necessarily for the people that were hearing it at that time, right? But it was speaking about a time to come. And what's unique about Ezekiel is he does speak. His prophecy mirrors a lot of like what John gets in Revelation, right? Like their prophecies are very similar. Whereas Isaiah and Jeremiah often prophesied, let's say, about Jesus, who was coming in this life. Ezekiel is kind of even going beyond Jesus. Like Ezekiel's prophecy is much more about this new kingdom that Jesus will rule at some point in the second coming and things of that nature. So to your point, even this unification of Israel is not a literal unification, right? We know this, Jesus' time, the Jews and the Samaritans still ain't like each other.
Still there.
You know what I'm saying? Like they are still at each other's throats, man. We live in 2024 and they still don't like each other. That area of the world, right? There's still tension and there's still war. Yeah. And so we know that unification has not come, but it is a preview, to the day that Jesus returns. But
and I'm glad you pointed that out, because sometimes when I read through this, I'm like, Lord, when? Because I've never seen in history so far that any of this we will never, right, bow down to any other idols or profane. I'm like, what? When did that happen? Like, when did folks start getting rid of idols forever?
Yeah.
But like you said, it ain't happened yet.
Not yet.
We're talking about New Jerusalem. Yes. After the Lord comes the second time, right? And conquers and, judges Satan and all his remnants.
Yeah, definitely. So like I said, very, very reminiscent of when we get to Revelation, we'll probably hopefully remember all of this that we read to kind of come back to. So, all right, 38, we get this defeat of a man named Gog. He comes from the land of Magog, and it's a very interesting kind of chapters here, 38 and 39. They kind of really go together. I don't know if you kind of did any extra reading outside of this.
I tried. Yeah.
Because I had never heard of this guy, never heard of this land. He's technically, these names are mentioned a few other times prior to this in scripture. I think Magog is like a grandson of Noah type thing. There's a guy named that, probably not referring to him, but could be referring to like the people that came from him, essentially, right? In some ways, in the same way that we get the descendants of Lot and some others, right? When you come to the Edomites and the Moabites and all that stuff, right? But also mentioned the Gog is mentioned in like Chronicles and in pretty much the lineage of Judah, of Reuben specifically, right? There's a guy who's like a grandson of a guy named Joel that's there, but like other than that, it's just like small references of just like in lineage or people who share this name.
Did you see the Revelations one?
Yeah, I'm gonna get to that. Okay. So that's like prior to this.
Okay,
right. And then in Revelation, it's very similar to this. So that's what I just said, right? Like Revelation, John's writings and prophecy and Revelation similar to Ezekiel, and so many people, kind of scholars and individuals who study it, essentially just believe it's kind of a reference to just like the opponent of God. Like, so not necessarily anybody specific or, a specific nation, but essentially just like a representation of the opponents of God, right? Whoever is opposing him, whether it's Satan, his, armies, those kind of things is kind of what this references to. So I had to get all that because I read it all and I was like, I don't know what you're talking about. Like, I don't know who these people are. I don't know what it is. So, what else did you discover kind of as you were reading about it?
No, pretty much that conclusion, like in all the dealings of stuff, it was kind of like this conclusion of like all the enemies of God wrapped in one. This is who I am speaking against.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So again, though, still looking into the future per se, right? Into this reference of the end times, because again, that's what even John is referencing when he talks about it in Revelation, right? Now, in that case, it is Satan and like his armies. Like this is after Jesus is ruled for the 1,000 years, essentially. Like is when it comes up in Revelation, I think chapter 20. So still, again, that particular idea here, but what jumped out to you about what Ezekiel says towards Gog in this land of Magog in chapters 38 and 39?
Yeah, I think this is really interesting because I don't think I've read too much about like the Lord talking about what the enemy was thinking, right? Yeah, okay, so let me back up a little bit. It tells them to prepare and get ready, right? And then here in verse 10 it says, this is what the Lord says, on that day thoughts will arise in your mind and you will devise an evil plan. You will say, I will advance against a land of open villages, right? I'll come against this like tranquil people and all of that, and I will seize their spoil and all that. And I don't think I've ever really like noticed when God has said like these are the things that you are going to think about doing, and it is like the Lord's already telling them like I already know this evil that you're about to do. Let me just tell you what the evil is that you're about to do. So I think that was one of the first things that jumped out to me.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is definitely different. Like, as you said, not to say that it has not been said, but I don't know that it stuck out, specifically that God is kind of pointing out what they're thinking as they prepare to kind of attack and whatnot, or plan this evil plan. So, yeah, that's interesting. I don't know. I do think that just in general, right? Like, it's a very interesting knowing that it's not about any particular like war that's coming, right? Like, again, just comparing it to when Nebuchadnezzar in Babylon is coming to conquer Judah, right? Like, those kind of prophecies were pretty clear and straightforward on like what it was referring to particular things. It is interesting to me to try to interpret, like, man, what will this look like? Kind of, I think it was last week you asked, like, if we could ask God anything, and I was just like, yeah, man, I want to know how the end times is gonna go.
Yeah,
Like, give me some clarity.
It says in the last days, right, in verse 16 here.
Yeah, and so, like, I think just the more I'm trying to read it, I'm trying to go, okay, so help me understand, Lord, like how much of this will we actually get to see or experience or know? Like, is this something that's, again, it's gonna kind of happen after us in a sense, right? And we're not really gonna even notice it. I don't know, but I think just trying to read it from that perspective and seeing everything from just like, how people are, they're seizing these spoils and carrying off plunder. I'm like, what plunder? Like, at this time, what plunder are we talking about? This silver and this gold, this cattle and possessions, to see plenty of spoil. Like, what is that referring to? Where they're coming from, like in this remotest parts of the north, right? And riding these horses. So like, as I was reading it, I'm just trying to understand, like, because it's not necessarily as poetic as some other parts of scripture, right? Where like you talk about, let's say, the big tree, that was Assyria, right? Like, and the birds perching, it just seems more like this is what's gonna happen.
Yeah.
It was just really challenging, I should say, to read and also apply, like to take something from it as like, okay, what do I do with this information?
Yeah.
And I think that was the biggest challenge with me. We're reading 38 and 39, but was there anything that you thought was particularly interesting from it?
Yeah, I will. To your point, just trying to envision like what, because when you read scripture, sometimes you really want to read it like, I believe, as we should, I would believe every single word that I'm reading here, right? And if it's not poetic in intention, then it is literal, and I need to read it as such. And so that is where I'm like wrestling, because these are things that I know will happen in the end times that Revelations has said, but trying to even think of Ezekiel's words as potentially being that, right? Where in verse 19, it says, I swear in my zeal and fiery rage, on that day there will be a great earthquake in the land of Israel.
Yeah.
The fish of the sea, the birds of the sky, the animals of the field, every creature that crawls on the earth and on the ground, and every human being on the face of the earth will tremble before me. The mountains will be demolished. The cliffs will collapse, and every wall will fall to the ground. I will call for a sword against him on all my mountains. This is the declaration of the Lord. And every man's sword will be against his brother. And so we're talking about bloodshed, we're talking about torrential rains, hailstones, fires, burning sulfur, all these things. I'm like, wait a minute, mountains is dropping? Like, literally, I'm looking at these mountains, right?
Yeah.
And they're just collapsing, right? Like,
yeah.
Or these cliffs are collapsing. Like, what are we talking about? We got sulfur. This is Sodom and Gomorrah all over again. Like, we got sulfur, burning sulfur and stuff. And so, to me, it is kind of like, oh yeah, we must be talking about some end times. Like, we must be talking about something. We've heard, some of these things mentioned before in reading Revelations previously. So we know that, like, sometimes what's been referenced is like all these things come to an end at some point, right? Yeah. Even the earth itself, in terms of some of its form. And so, yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah. No, that's a good call out. And I think, particularly for those, the study of kind of end times is something that has gained a lot of popularity of late. Like, a lot of people are really kind of like reading and researching. And I think some of that comes from two things, in my opinion. Number one, just the great expanse and exposure of just education and information, right, that we live in now in 2024. Just how easy it is to learn something, research something, find something. in a way, and how easy it is to also disseminate that information should you have your own theory or ideas about stuff, right? And so there's a little bit of that I think has led to that. But two, it's also because in that same vein, because information spreads as fast as it does, it also feels like the world is falling apart around us.
Yeah, it does.
You know? And I have my own theories that, again, a lot of that is more so just, we just know it's happening.
Yeah, it's access.
Yeah, it's just access to information, right? Like half the stuff that's taking place now, 100 years ago, you just wouldn't have even known. Like, transparently, it's really, really tragic. Like, in Georgia, the school shooting that just took place, recently, like now that's instant news, in the point of like, even as it's taking place, everyone in the country knows what's happening before a person's even apprehended, which is minutes, right? To actually be apprehended. The whole nation, maybe even the whole world, depending on how many people's like tuning in, but at least the whole nation knows what's happening. When our parents were even growing up, I might even go back 100 years.
Yeah, no.
When our parents were growing up, if something like that took place, they might find out on the evening news. Maybe. You know what I'm saying? Like in Georgia, they grew up in California. It might have made the California evening news that something like that took place in Georgia. And so like,
and then grandparents.
Oh yeah, like it might have been somewhere in the paper.
Yeah, in the paper, and then before then, it was word of mouth.
Yeah, so like when you think about how quickly that has changed, right? And how quickly information spreads, it does make it seem like when you're so overstimulated with all of what's happening in the world at a fingertip and at an instant, it feels like the world is falling apart around us. So that can all lead to this vision of, as you said, man, if I look around, I'm like, well, earthquakes, oh yeah, we just had one of them, right? Like, and walls may be falling down. Yeah, sure, somebody's walls was falling recently, right? Torrential rain. I mean, it was raining like heck here in Orlando.
Listen, that was on the way down to Orlando,
right?
What is this?
Hailstorms and fire, like all those kind of things. We can very easily find all of that happening
because now we know,
and then just go, oh man, it feels like we're in the end times, right? And so, like, I think again, I get it, and I'm not necessarily claiming we aren't. That's not my goal for this podcast or for even this conversation. The point I'm trying to make is, I think it's good for you to call this out, because I think the more you look at it and you study, you can understand where people are coming from in some of this, but also come back to the word and just kind of be clear. Because, for instance, it starts off with that great earthquake is in the land of Israel, right? Like, and it also seems like all these things are happening in the same day, essentially, right? So those are some things that I'm like, all right, well, let me take it in full and in whole and not in part. So if I take it in part, it's very easy for me to, misinterpret or understand. So, or misunderstand. So, anything else there in 38 before we go to 39? Okay. All right, well, 39 is where we'll end today. As I said, we will... your reading will take you all the way through 40, but I'll explain here in a sec kind of why we'll stop here at 39. But was there anything in 39 specifically that jumped out to you?
Yeah, like the Lord gets bossy one more time on him, right? Of, now this is what I'm going to do to you, right? And in the context of all you nations, or this large enemy, or whoever, but it's just real disrespectful. Is it then I will knock your bow from your left hand and make your arrows drop from your right hand. This is verse 3, right? And all your troops, all your troops, and the peoples who are with you will fall on the mountains of Israel, right? And I will give you as food to every kind of predator, bird, and to the wild animals, right? And it's just kind of like disrespectful, because he can do it. And so this isn't just like figurative speech here, because like Noah and Blake, like they're like, I'm going to. No, you're not. Like you can't. You can't. So stop. And they do it because they're trying to be like David, right? Like, I'm David. I'm gonna sling you. Noah told me he brought a rock in the house today because he was like, Mommy, I brought this rock just in case we came inside and there was a lion or a bear. I throw it at him. And I was like, first of all, why is there a lion in the resort? Problems, okay? Secondly, if there's, you ain't gonna do nothing with this rock. Like, the empty threats here, but in his mind, he's David. But anyways.
He comes in the behalf of the name of the Lord, okay? Noah is ready.
He be ready.
He's ready.
Like, how many rocks are in socks?
Yeah, I definitely find.
It was in the laundry. It was socks with rocks in them. Like,
yeah, that's
anyway.
a slingshot. But anyway,
their slingshots are ridiculous. But anyways, but the Lord can back this up because all of this is possible. And so I think it's just really interesting in how much imagery he goes into saying that they will be food, and then later on even saying, to the animals, prepare yourself for this feast.
Yeah, that's where I was going to go. I just thought that was so interesting that, like, he has these animals and birds preparing to eat the flesh of men.
And drink the blood, though.
Yeah.
That was disturbing, honestly.
Yeah, like I said, we've talked about before. Some scripture is just, like, really gory.
It's too much.
Like a horror film in some ways. But, yeah, I was like, that? God? Was that necessary?
Yeah, because one thing is that that's forbidden, at least for humans. Like, that is absolutely forbidden.
Yeah.
Like, and he is like, keeps going in on it. Like, 19, you will eat fat until you are satisfied and drink blood until you are drunk. Yeah. And my sacrificial feasts are prepared for you. Like, what in the world?
Yeah. Yeah, but I mean, that's, again, it's to your point of just disrespect, right? Like, I will feed you to the animals is like, it's about as low as it comes.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
And not to say that the Lord is not, we say disrespectful in like street words, disrespectful, not that like he has to respect us in any way, right?
Well, yeah, no.
I just want to clarify, my street verbiage.
Got you.
To individuals who might not know what I mean by disrespect. Like, you don't have to respect us. Like,
you need Urban Dictionary to
the
understand
urban,
you?
Yeah, I just need Urban Dictionary to understand.
I don't think you're that urban.
I'm just making sure.
Okay.
I'm real suburban. Yeah, I'm not that urban. Yeah, no, I'm real like where the Whole Foods at, Sprouts.
Yeah, so I say that to say I don't
real
know
Sprouts.
Much of an interpretation of your disrespect.
I just want to make sure that there's no confusion.
Got you.
I just felt the need to explain.
Okay, cool.
As I make my Publix pickup order.
Yeah, with your non-preservative, sugar-free,
Come on.
no sugar-free added.
No high fructose corn syrup. No refined sugars.
$10 jelly.
Vegan.
Yeah, definitely not.
Just saying.
It's definitely not street.
Yeah. There ain't no thug in me no more.
Okay, well, let's close this out because 39, we also get this restoration of Israel. And again, it's about in the end time, right? In the end, God will restore us to him. Was there anything kind of from 21 through the end, verse 21 through the end, that was significant to you?
No, I mean, he mentions like in 23, I guess it's a yes. I said no, but I should say yes. In 23, he talks about how he hid his face from them, right? And I hid my face from them and handed them over to their enemies so that they all fell by the sword. And I dealt with them according to their uncleanness and transgressions, and I hid my face from them. And I think that part is just, it's just hard to hear when the Lord turns his face from somebody. Yeah. And so in 26 he says they will feel remorse, and he's doing this all so that they can like humble themselves again, right? Yeah. And come back to him. So, but he says in 28, which is really comforting, like I will leave none of them behind, and I will no longer hide my face from them, for I will pour out my spirit on the house of Israel. And so it was kind of like, I'm turning my face. It's because y'all did this, but I'm not going to leave a single one of you guys behind, and I'm going to turn my face back to you and pour out my spirit on you.
Yeah. Yeah, nothing stuck out to me except 8 verses from the. Yeah, no, nothing really except verses 23 and 24 and 26 and 28. But it's fine.
Nothing but the whole chapter.
Nothing but the whole thing. Stuck out to me. No, that's good. I did love 28. That was one part of what I was, one of the things that stuck out to me. But I would say, I also just kind of wondered a little bit, and even going back to the unification back in 37 of Israel, like I wonder how much the people of Judah like received some of what was being said, right? As this prophecy is essentially saying, like this kingdom that we actually went to war with in some cases, right? And we were really at odds with the northern kingdom of Israel, because even here, like it refers to the fact that I restore the fortunes. This is verse 25. The fortunes of Jacob. Compassion on the whole house of Israel. Like he's saying that it's all of you together, and so there's a little bit of me that wonders how they felt about that, right? To know that, especially knowing again how the Jews and the Samaritans kind of felt towards each other. But even it does, in my mind, again, just continue to reflect the heart of God, which was always about unity. It was always about everyone.
Always.
We've gotten plenty of, prophecies to talk about even Gentile nations and things of that nature that God will, save and restore. And so like, I don't think he really cared what Judah felt about it, that ultimately he's still telling you like, I'm coming for all of you guys. I will restore all of you. And I think that's encouraging to know that for him, it was always about all of us, not just anyone. And as you said, he'll leave no one behind. So, well, that brings us to the end of today's discussion, technically our reading into chapter 40. I stopped because starting Monday or next week, we will do 40. We'll read 41 through 48 on Monday and Tuesday. But 40 starts this vision of this new temple. And it really just kind of goes with the next couple chapters. So I just felt like it made more sense to talk about that together. So we'll talk about that in Monday's conversation.
Yeah.
So again, you can read chapter 40 if you like, but we'll actually discuss it next week in our reading. But appreciate you joining us today in our reading. I know you've made it all the way to the end of the week into this video. So just want to say, man, we really appreciate you guys. Those of you that continue to just watch, stay engaged with us, wherever it is, Facebook, YouTube, our church app, Spotify, whatever it is that you may be listening or engaged. We're just really grateful and praying that this is helpful for you. I'm going to make an early shout out. I'll start to kind of bring this up again over the next couple of weeks. But we actually start the New Testament first week of next month. We're about 4 weeks out from starting the New Testament. I think it's a great time and a space and a place for you to invite someone to join you in the reading plan, to come alongside with this podcast and the reading. Even you yourself, if you're just listening to the podcast where you're not reading alone just yet, a great place to pick up and start the reading will be on October 7th when we start Matthew chapter 1. Start with us in the New Testament. Do the New Testament between now and the end of this year, 3 months. You'll be through the entire thing. So make an early plug for that. And of course, I'll do it over the next couple of weeks. But hopefully, again, this is helpful for you. Appreciate you joining us. Look forward to seeing you next week on the Vibes Daily Podcast.
Thank you for joining us for the Vibes Daily Podcast. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform or download our favorite, the Vibes Church app. Visit vibes.church/devoted for additional episodes, notes, details, and the latest merch. Join us next time as we continue our journey through the Bible. Take good care.